Hi everybody, it's Az here from Heel vs Babyface. So what can Troves of the Thunder King scenario back in Mists of Pandaria tell us about fun levels in Warlords of Draenor? Well, you'll be surprised at actually how much it does. But before I can get there, I need to take us back a little bit further in time to the release of Mists of Pandaria and patch 5.0. Now, there's absolutely no debating that Mists of Pandaria at the time was the least well-received World of Warcraft expansion there had been. People were already a bit iffy about the cutesy feel to it. We wanted still to keep things at a high octane level, and Blizzard wanted to slow things right down. They believed that after dealing with threats like Illidan, Arthas and Deathwing, we needed to take a little bit of a break. A break we didn't want to take. We needed the next extreme level to take us forward with this World of Warcraft game. So, when we got to level 90, this is where things really kind of fell apart. The leveling itself in Mists of Pandaria had been pretty dour to begin with, but once we got to top level, we had the daily saturation, the rep grinds which hid gear, valor points were virtually impossible to cap out each week outside of raiding, PvP was falling apart at the seams, there were too few dungeons, the introduction of scenarios was completely messed up. Things weren't good in the land of World of Warcraft. So, when patch 5.1 came along, afterwards started to see some pretty hefty sub losses early doors in the expansion, well, the trend continued, because 5.1 wasn't particularly great either. The only redeeming feature of this patch was a very, very good storyline that was sadly interwoven with a very, very messy Lion's Landing and Domination Point PvP/daily grind area which didn't quite hit the mark. So Blizzard were on a big downward spiral. Subscription losses were really piling up, and this was a game that had always been the pinnacle of an MMORPG. Their next offering of patches had to be good. It had to hit home with the community, and it had to be strong. And you know what? It was massive. It was massive in as much as it was the knockout blow. It was a fantastic patch, was 5.2. And the reason why 5.2 in my eyes was so successful was because of the diversity of content which it offered. Literally, there was something for absolutely everybody in this patch. First of all, we had the Isle of Thunder, bringing with it a couple of new reps based on whatever faction we were playing. And the dailies had been definitely toned down, and we had a command table which we could choose to either do PvP based objectives or PvP based objectives, giving that right to people to decide. We also had a 13 boss raid contained within the island as well, which had to be unlocked in different phases, working in cooperation and coordination with the rest of your server. Didn't matter if it was Horde or Alliance. If you were slacking off and not working on the island, you weren't going to open up the next areas till later than everybody else. It was a great incentive to get people into the zone and working together. We had 11 rares with which to farm, especially Warlocks as an incentive because they could drop the green fire starting questline item, and the green fire scenario for Warlocks was possibly not only one of the greatest bits of content to ever go into the World of Warcraft, but it's arguably got the best ever boss fight in the World of Warcraft. We then had the Troves of the Thunder King scenario, which of course we'll talk about very soon indeed. And still on the vein of scenarios, Blizzard got scenarios right in 5.2. They'd completely messed it up in 5.0 and 5.1, having it as a 3-person based area where you didn't need a tank or a healer. There was no threat, there was no fun. In 5.2, they made all scenarios single player. And those scenarios became storyline pieces of quest which were given to you when you went up a level in reputation with your respective faction. There was also the Isle of Giants, an area that seemed purely dedicated to people who wanted to grind. If grinding is your kettle of fish, then you could go up there, kill dinosaur after dinosaur after dinosaur, gain their bones from doing so, and then using their bones as a currency, hand them in for various items. Gold, pet, mount. Hunters had an extra incentive to be here because they could also get the ability to tame the dire horn pets as well. And if you just wanted to turn up here but not do all the horrible grinding just to get the dinosaur bones, there were also some pets on the Dinomancers to be got as well. So even on the Isle of Grind, it was designated and meant to be that way. As well, of course, as the amazing world boss Undasta. Yes, remember when world bosses were actually fun to do and not standing around Draenor doing absolutely sweet fuck all. But on top of that, that wasn't it. There was even more. We had pets to grab. We had mounts to grab. We had the Zandalari Warbringers, which were all around the coastal lines of Pandaria, which are still being farmed heavily to this date, just to show how people want to still get their hands on the dire horn mounts. There was also the rep catch-up tokens through killing these as well. We had the Thunderforge on the Isle of Thunder, where not only could blacksmiths craft some amazing new gear, but that amazing new gear was also transmogrified as well to look like pieces from days gone by. And then we had the Tillers bringing work orders, which again were taken a step way too far in Warlords of Draenor, that allowed us to gain rep with other factions in Pandaria. There was a ton of content in 5.2. Not only was there a ton of content, there was a ton of relevant, interesting content that gave great diversity in case you got bored of one. Were you sick of doing the dailies on the Isle of Thunder? That's fine. Nip over to the Isle of Giants and do some grinding. A bit bored with that now? That's fine. Go off and start to farm the Zandalari Warbringers. See if you can get yourself a big bag of profession kit. See if you can get yourself the dire horn mount. See if you can get yourself some tokens to get those reps up which would bind on a cow. Maybe not for you. Maybe for an alt character that you were working on. There were so many choices, and of course Warlocks, if you needed an extra incentive to do anything, then maybe you could go back and continue to try and defeat Canrathad. So what if you wanted a break from all of this though? You know, you'd done your dailies on the Isle of Thunder, you'd done plenty of grinding, and let's face it, because the Zandalari Warbringers were so heavily farmed, you were just getting a little bit upset flying to all the different locations where they were, and they're all dead or not yet spawned. You just wanted something fun to do. And this is exactly where the Troves of the Thunder King scenario kicked in. First of all, Blizzard didn't attempt in any way, shape or form from blocking you from doing this. They didn't put the criteria to get into the Trove hidden behind a wall of hurt or pain. No, you needed a key. And if you got a key once a week, the chances of getting a second key were ridiculously low. So it was one crack at the cherry each lockout, maybe two if you were lucky. And of course, if you had alts, you could all get a single key per week on those alts. The more alts you had, the more chances you had of running the Troves of the Thunder King. So how did you get them? Well, all the chests, the caches of the Thunder King which were scattered around the island, they would most likely contain one if you were lucky enough to open them. And even if you weren't lucky enough to come across a chest, the rares that were on the island, the first rare of the week that you killed normally dropped the key for you. And if you didn't get the key from that first one, chances are you probably would pick it up from the second or third at the absolute worst. So when you got to the Troves of the Thunder King, it worked on multiple levels indeed. It didn't matter whether or not you were a complete noob to the World of Warcraft or you were a seasoned veteran. This actually had multiple layers to it that could really make you think, or just make you run around like a headless chicken having the most fun that 5 minutes could possibly offer. You could either run inside, start the timer, it starts ticking down, 5 minutes, 4 minutes 59 seconds, 4 minutes 58 seconds, and just see every chest that you could, run up to it, open it up, and grab what was inside. And normally what was inside would be gold. You could maybe get some tokens which would allow you to purchase additional items, not only with bonus rolls in previous raids, but also items to help you out in the scenario itself. If you're even luckier, you might come across a Shanzi ritual stone, which you could either sell for a decent amount of gold again, or combine it with a couple more and do a weekly quest which got you 150 Valor points. Bearing in mind, Valor points were still relatively difficult to get your hands on, so 150 went a long way back in those times. Also, if you had managed to come across one of the burial trove keys that allow you a bonus loot roll at the end. So even when you'd finish the scenario, you would stand in a room full of additional chests. And these additional chests could be opened up by the burial trove keys. And when you did open these ones, they could have a 502 epic item inside. That, of course, was the Raid Finder equivalent at that time. But on top of that, you could get green items. On top of that, you could get rep tokens. There was so much there. And even if you had a bad Trove of the Thunder King run, chances are you'd still be walking away with at least 200 to 300 gold, and then decide what to do with your items. Did you get a couple of greens that you wanted to sell? Did you maybe get that epic at the end inside of the chest that you might want to break down for some crafting materials, etc, etc. Even on a bad run, it was still a good run. But this is where we come in to the layers of complexity. You see, what I've just mentioned there sounds very superficial to start with and just fun, you know, grab, 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 grab. But all of it actually linked together. You see, although you were having 5 minutes of amazing fun, if you got that epic at the end, you were still gearing your character. You were still keeping your character relevant, especially if it was an alt-based character, and especially if you weren't raiding. So those 502 items that you could grab actually made rather a lot of difference. Also, the rep tokens inside, although they didn't give humongous amounts of rep, they contributed rather nicely to the levels of rep and the factions that you're working on the Isle of Thunder itself. Any little helps, I've always been told, is a good thing, and this is something that I did absolutely agree with here. It was a great way of getting your gold supplies up without having to put you into some awful gold sinks, which we see in Warlords of Draenor right now. I mean, let's do the comparison. Fun in Troves of the Thunder King has translated to what in Warlords of Draenor? Standing by a command table, dragging followers into a hole and clicking go. Something which takes a matter of a couple of seconds. You then sit back and wait for your gold to come in. I would take Troves of the Thunder King over that every single solitary day of the week. And then again, Troves of the Thunder King also had some really cool achievements to go for. If you used the items at the beginning correctly, which you could get, whether it be the levitate or the ghost key to allow you into other areas, you could get to the end of the scenario, kill the final boss, get an achievement or partial achievement for that, and then keep on doing the partial achievements, all linking to the meta, which got you, da-da, I've done everything that can be done within Troves of the Thunder King. And of course, as time went on and the likelihood is you started to get more and more alts, it was just a great way to break up the monotony that was going on with Mr. Pandaria 2. Because 5.3 was a massive regressive step, and 5.4 wasn't too bad, but when it was with you for 14 months, it was so stale and old by the end of it, there wasn't really too much fun to be had with that expansion. And yet, we could always return to the Troves of the Thunder King to have that element of fun, to run around and forget about everything and be rewarded for doing so too. Getting the reputations, getting the coins which we could use potentially for bonus rolls, or the additional coins which could be used for older raids or purchasing items to do the trove. Getting the parchments which we could combine together, and those parchments can be handed in for rep with the current faction that you were working on within the Isle of Isle of Thunder 2. All those things came together so nicely indeed. And when Blizzard announced that they were going to remove the Troves of the Thunder King, although it was sad, you could understand why they were going to do it. Because with the new expansion coming out, they didn't want you to be reliant on Troves of the Thunder King as a good way to generate gold and a good way to generate or keep your income ticking over, especially if you did have multiple alts by then. What they wanted, of course, was the new content in Warlords of Draenor to be that relevant and interesting and fun for you that you wouldn't miss Troves of the Thunder King, because there would be some sort of alternative. I'm not necessarily saying a direct alternative where there was a new scenario for Warlords of Draenor, which pretty much did the same but just looked a little bit different. Even though Blizzard, looking right now, that's not a bad fucking idea right there. But they wanted things like the garrison to compensate for it, and the follower missions to feel fun, that they would compensate for it. And the simple fact of the matter is, they haven't at all. And fun has been one word which has been sorely missing in Warlords of Draenor. It seems absolutely devoid of it. And the most frustrating thing for, I think, for all of us is not the fact that they're not getting things right at the moment, because they can get things right. Even with a very mediocre expansion like Mists of Pandaria, 5.2 crushes it as a content patch. So they still have the ability to do so. But not that, they're just not listening. We don't want to do the Apexis Crystal Daily, we said in 6.0, so we get it again and again in 6.1. We don't like this, we're saying in 6.1. We have a whole zone of it in 6.2 in Tanaan Jungle. It's just a massive zone of Apexis Crystal grinding, and everything is just revolved around a singularity, which is Apexis Crystals. If we're not having fun generating Apexis Crystals now, we're not going to have fun generating Apexis Crystals in 6.2 either, when you're literally forcing us to do it if we are to progress anywhere within Tanaan Jungle. And this is why Troves of the Thunder King has such an important element on fun within Warlords of Draenor. Because although Troves of the Thunder King was a 5-minute, that was all, a 5-minute blast of fun, it was multi-layered and not only compensated you financially, it compensated you reputationally, it also, if there's such a word, if there isn't, there bloody should be, and it also compensated you gear-wise as well. But on top of that, of course, you had your alternatives. There were always alternatives to do. And the reason why Warlords is so stale, and the reason why people are flocking away from Warlords of Draenor in their millions, and literally millions, with 3 million people leaving in the last quarter, is because there are no options. There are no Troves of the Thunder King. And this is where Troves of the Thunder King now, folks, becomes metaphorical as opposed to physical. There is literally no Troves of the Thunder King in Warlords of Draenor. There is no area which we can go to, even if it's just for a few moments, and just blast our way and have some fun. We can't go into the dungeons. They're not fun anymore. Well, I'm talking most likely for the majority of people. I know there's always going to be exceptions to the rule, but dungeons aren't fun. The reason why dungeons aren't fun anymore, they're so easy to do. Doing Apexis Crystal dailies are awful. It's not fun. It's never been fun, and it's just leading to burnout. And if people are already burnt out doing it, what on earth makes you think in 6.2 Blizzard that making a whole zone based around it is going to change that burnout? I'm sick and tired of it already. The thought of doing more Apexis Crystal grinding in 6.2 just makes me want to puke. We don't have that metaphorical Troves of the Thunder King to turn to in Warlords of Draenor. We don't have that 5-minute blast of fun. The command table's stale and stagnant and boring. It doesn't reward particularly well. Maybe once every couple of weeks or so you can get your mythic piece of gear from BlackRock or whatever. But grabbing gold, hundreds of gold by dragging a follower in, although the gold's well received, the method in which we're doing it, it's not there. If I logged on to Warlords of Draenor right now and said to myself, let's go to that 5-minute burst of fun which will just lift my spirits, I'm blank. I am literally blank for an idea about what to do. So this is why Blizzard have to look back now to learn. They have to look back at patches like 5.2 and realise, why did this patch stem the flow of people leaving the World of Warcraft? Because that's exactly what it did. Subscriptions really started to plateau at a certain level in Mists of Pandaria. And I think 5.2 has got a considerable weight behind that. I think it's got a lot to say about the reason why people stopped leaving in their absolute millions like they had been doing. Because it was great. It was a great patch with great diversity. Something we just don't have in Warlords of Draenor. We don't have in the World of Warcraft at all. Diversity. So physically, Troves of the Thunder King was amazing. Metaphorically, it says everything about fun in Warlords of Draenor. And I hope you enjoyed the vid. If you did, do give it a thumbs up and also subscribe to my channel. Follow me on social media and Twitch for live streaming. Those links are in the description down below. And I'll be back with some more stuff very soon. You take care, everybody. Bye-bye.